Welcome back to Life Groups Week 2. This week our message is Tested at the Table from Daniel 1:8 through verse 21. I'm so excited to have you back with us. I hope you had a great week of Life Groups. I know I heard from many of you that your Life Group went excellently. I got some photos, heard some reports, and that's great. Some of you said not a lot of your people showed up this week, and I totally understand that. Last year we had a life group in which there was very few members, but the people persevered, and this year they have a full life group. So you never know exactly how it's going to shake down with your life groups, but I really do encourage you to have that personal contact, that personal invitation. I'll tell you, that's what gets people through the door. Even if you have a phone number, you can call them up or send them a text and just invite them even back again for this week. So I'm praying that you have just a wonderful life group this week. Just want to address some of the application questions from it. We're looking at obviously a classic part of the scripture where Daniel and the other young men are being forced to compromise what they believe that they should be eating by the king's cafeteria, as Pastor David called it, and yet Daniel purposes in his heart not to eat those things, to not defile himself with the king's dainties. And we see him become successful as a result from that. And what a great study. There's no lack of things to discuss, similarities with our culture today. The first thing we can think about is what do we accept from the culture and what do we resist in the culture. So for example, Pastor David said Daniel didn't resist his name change or his education, but he did resist the food that he was being required to eat. So that's always an interesting question. What do we accept from the culture? What do we resist from the culture? And you could probably have a 30-minute discussion just on that. Other things having to do with Daniel standing out, risking severe punishment just to be holy in his relationship with the Lord, and resisting what the king told him to do. He could have been punished for that, but yet we see him being successful. And what ways can we stand out as being Christians, even under the risk of persecution or punishment? It might not turn out as well as Daniel, but where can we say the name of Christ, or where can we bring the love of Jesus to in our world today, even when it costs us something? That's a great issue to discuss as well. Another side point that Pastor David talked about was being honest with God. A lot of times, even I think as Christians, we aren't really honest with God. We kind of hide our emotions with God. We hide what we're thinking, even though God knows everything. And Pastor David's point was that Daniel could have been disappointed or had a bad attitude about where he was placed in Babylon, but yet he wasn't. And we saw God bring him out of that situation. But as far as Daniel's human, which he was, we know that he went through times of discouragement and disappointment, probably being placed out of his home and out of his family, taken to Babylon and raised in this foreign environment. Yeah, his attitude could have been bad. The whole issue is, are we being honest with God? Are we taking things that are out upon our hearts to the Lord and asking the Lord to work in those situations, just kind of our raw emotions? And Pastor David encouraged that. Ask your life group, when have they done that? How did it turn out? What happened? I think it's just a great discussion you could be having. The last thing, I loved what Pastor David said. The last point, he said, inner conviction can overcome any outward pressure, and God-honoring convictions yield God-given rewards. Discussing both of those things is enough to fill your life group. One of those inward convictions that you have held so firmly that they overcome outward pressures. And when we hold on to those things, we see God bring the reward. What an awesome study. What a great thing to discuss of how that's worked out in your life group members' lives. So do that. The second week for me is all about capitalizing on the relationships that I've been building in the first week, getting to know everybody in the first week, doing those icebreakers, laying that foundation. Now you can really start to share one another's lives in the second week. So maybe even doing something that would encourage people to share some more of their personal testimonies. You see that I geared a lot of the questions around those things as well. I think will produce great fruit in your life groups this week. Well, have a great life group, and we'll see you next week.